Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of They Say. I am so honored to be here this Wednesday and just grateful for this week ahead. It's been uberly successful, but I'm even more grateful to have this amazing guest on They Say. He is a legend in these LinkedIn streets and just corporate streets. And I love LinkedIn, and I think this is something we all can attest to because you get friends near and far that are just as passionate about things and can just it opens up the world to you where there's I feel like there's no limitations, Roberto. Like I feel like you can get to know anyone and make that deeper, like intentional connection. So I just want to welcome you today. Say I want to thank you for saying yes, and I want to thank you for being so willing to share your knowledge with us.
Well, Allison, is any time that I get to spend with you is time well spent. So I'm always glad to be able to spend time with you. So thank you for having me. It's great to be here. But I also totally agree with you that like LinkedIn is like, I always say it's like a big convention and you're there every day and you get to show up, you get to meet people. And as long as you're taking it sort of in stride and you're sort of enjoying yourself, you could meet a ton of really cool people. And like, actually I've met some really great friends, including you, like where now we like get to hang out and talk. So I really appreciate the time.
Yes, I know. Because when can we sit down with like experts on all levels, like corporate executives, people who have like put out just strategic messaging and actually have a seat at the table with you guys. So I am so honored and I'm grateful for They Say, because really the platform is to be able to give us a seat at the table with people you don't normally get to interact with because they're almost like kind of far off mystical figures. But I'm grateful for individuals like you that don't mind sitting down and kind of helping us understand your journey. Because I think before we got on here, we talked about storytelling and just the importance of sharing your story because our lives parallel so much. And it's like I have to pinch myself because I'm like, oh, you can totally relate to that.
Yeah, no, it's funny because it's like, hey, I just think that, you know, LinkedIn and so much social media, there used to be such a broadcast version of one to many, right? We put the ad up, you hear it. Where, you know, social media, as we all know, this isn't new news, but I think LinkedIn's just changing it in the way of many to many in the professional sense. And so all of a sudden, you're not just, you know, talking to colleagues, you're not just talking to people at the conference that are within your industry, you're talking to everybody who's a professional. And the ability to be able to reach people in that different way is so amazing because then you can have casual collisions in a way that you might have in the office if you're remote working right now or whatever it is. But like you kind of just can like you can just like go into different places within LinkedIn and then you meet really cool people that you can kind of just collaborate with and work with. And I think it's really democratizing the workforce.
Yes, I think so too. And in so many areas where there's so much tension and dissension and anger and negative talk, LinkedIn has really created a space where you can connect with like-minded individuals and, like you said, collaborate.
Yeah,
and really work towards that bigger picture of just making the world a better place.
Yeah, well, I also think Facebook went through the journey of like, you know, I think there was a moment where there was a lot of like negativity on Facebook, and I'm personally not on Facebook anymore for that exact reason. I think LinkedIn's got a little bit of like a catch valve, where it's like this is you can be who you are as a person, but also at the same time, this is your professional brand, and those two things married together are. You're not just going to go off the hinges. You're not just going to but I think that's good in a sense where it's kind of got both like, you know, the yin and the yang of who you are as a person, where you have to show up in a way that's like, you can be totally your authentic self, but at the same time, you've got to be able to be a professional person that wants to get hired, that wants to get clients. So like there's a really healthy tension on LinkedIn that I think people show up in a different way than they would on other social media channels.
Ooh, I love that. And I really love that yin and the yang piece. That's like very true because it's two sides of a coin and you kind of flip what you want to be, but you've got to be balanced, right?
Right, you got to be, and isn't life supposed to be about balance, right? So it's actually kind of nice in a way that, because I don't believe that there's personal Roberto and there's professional Roberto. I think there's Roberto, but I also know that there's different components of who I am as a person, and you know, sometimes I can go out and have drinks at a happy hour, and sometimes I'm, you know, in a boardroom. But both versions of Roberto are true, and I think that the more that LinkedIn's kind of bringing this congruence factor of it's not the Instagram who you say you are, you know, in a quick picture, or the Facebook of like, you know, which is more about like a yearbook in a sense, where I think that you're looking at LinkedIn where kind of like bringing the best of both worlds together. And the more that we can move the needle of not just being about professional, but personal that informs the professional, I think that's really kind of where LinkedIn's moving.
And I want to congratulate you and your husband on him becoming a citizen. I so remember this. So congratulations to you both. I know we were very excited when my dad became a citizen, and I can only imagine how excited you guys are.
Yeah, no, it was like 8 years in the making. I guess I posted the bridge was I posted on LinkedIn in order to share it. But it was just, if anybody asks me if I do project management, I will tell very succinctly, yes. My husband now lives in America. Anyone that can navigate the immigration system is able to get you out of any country or to do anything that you need to do. These are life skills that are applicable within the workforce and beyond. But more than that, it's just great to be able to be together, and like have documentation that makes sure that we can.
I love that. And like I said, congratulations. That was
Thank you.
I remember my dad became a citizen when I was in the 6th grade, and it was funny, but it was sad because it was during a time where the current administration at the time was talking about like removing people who weren't citizens, but he had been in the U.S. since he was in high school. So it was a sad situation, but he finally became a citizen, and he is like a super citizen. He has all his flags, like he's taking it to another level. So I'm so proud of him.
So my husband and I got separated for 8 months during the pandemic, which was the nightmare. But like, it was just, so you realize that, getting that foundational paperwork is important. But I really appreciate it. It was a really wonderfully celebratory day in our household on Friday.
Oh, that's awesome. So let's talk about your journey, Roberto, because I feel like you have such a unique story. You've worked for some major brands nationally and really helped get their messaging out and help them become effective in their communication. So share that journey with us.
Yeah, sure. So like my lion's share of my career has been in in-house companies. That's been at Tesco, which is the largest retailer in the UK and one of the biggest businesses internationally. HSBC, the big financial institution, and at Fannie Mae here in the US. But then I've also worked in agency work where I've worked for Weber Shandwick, I worked with Edelman, I worked with the diversity and inclusion agency very early in my career. But, in those in-house roles where I think I really sharpened my teeth were in California, in Asia, in Central Europe, in London, with Tesco and HSBC, I was head of communications across the UK and Europe. And at Fannie Mae, I was head of communications for external communications here in the U.S. But just like 20 years of communications across lots of just different disciplines, across lots of different geographies. And, I always like to joke, I like lots of different sauces with my French fries. And as I built my career, I've always tried to make sure that I'm broadening and deepening my own bench as I go through it. But, it's been a really interesting journey over the past 20 years because communications has pretty significantly changed in terms of, where it is in terms of altitude within the organization, what the many hats that we wear, how much reputation matters to a brand and to an organization. Well, I think, it was a thing that I was very passionate about always throughout my career, but now the passion is sort of a commodity because there's so many brands that know that they need something that probably before it was more of a separate thing of communications is a thing over there that we need to do. But actually now it's so intrinsically involved into your DNA of your organization that it's really, really at the forefront.
Well, messaging is so important. And I think now more than ever, you have to be clear on your messaging and where you stand on certain topics. Because I feel like these generations that are coming behind me and us, they're a lot clearer on what they stand for, what they believe. So really getting the messaging out appropriately and really letting people know where you stand on certain topics that are important to the masses. And I think that organizations and corporations are really definitely need to continue to take a strategic approach, but definitely dive in a little bit more to really engage those generations to come.
Yeah, and so for me, it's messaging for sure, because that's like the sharp end of the stick, right? It's what's the thing you say, but there's something that I think that's so much deeper in understanding what the messaging is, which is what's your purpose, what's your mission, what's your vision, what are your values. And it's interesting when you see brands, or when you see sort of personal brands, or when you see corporate brands, or anything, right, where the thing you say, it's grounded in what you believe, who you are, why you walked there, why you're in the room. And so as a corporate communicator, as I'm looking at when we're talking about the messaging, it's like the fifth step, right? Okay. Because you've got to back up into like, where are we trying to go? What's our North Star? Like, why do we exist? It sounds existential, and some people, especially when you start to talk about a framework like that, it's like, oh, that's too big. But actually what you find out is the words that you use are wrong if you don't know why you're there in the first place. And so, like, for me, it's all about putting down the right foundation before you pick out the drapes, because you could pick out the wrong drapes because you don't have the right window, and all of a sudden you got to go buy new drapes. And I know that's like a really simplistic way of thinking about it, but for me, it's like, get the cement down first, and once the cement's down, you can start to build upon all the other pillars of what the house looks like, which includes messaging.
Ooh, that is profound. But it's what I take that as, you got to start with the core of where you're trying to go. And I think that sometimes we kind of miss the fundamentals, right? And I think it's not bad to go back to the fundamentals so you can build upon them.
Right, but there's also the other side of the coin. So I'm going to totally contradict myself here, right? Which is sometimes, sometimes you just got to go, and so I think because there's also like atrophy sometimes of like, you spend a year or two figuring out this existential equation to like, where are we going? What are we doing? Where sometimes you just got to start, and Esther Perel, which is a really famous psychologist, she always talks about like, on a pan, if you can't get the crust to move, once you get the crust to move, the whole pan gets clean. But you got to get that first bit of the crust to move. So sometimes you just got to, like on LinkedIn, for example, you just got to start talking. And I don't think it's like throwing spaghetti against the wall, but at least start moving, and then your audience will give you a shape, a form of what it is they care about. It helps you refine your messaging. So I don't think it's just totally like, get your foundation right or else bust. Sometimes it's like top down, where it's like, just start doing and feeling and seeing what people give you information towards, and actually it starts to formulate what the foundation looks like. So for me, there's like, I think that sometimes you can get, otherwise there's paralysis. If that makes sense.
You're exactly right. So I get in trouble because I'm the second one of the coin. I just like and they're like, oh, wait, what are you doing? I'm like, just follow me and we'll figure it out as we go.
Well, starting a new business and starting a new venture, you got to go top down, bottom up. Because if you start don't let perfect be the enemy of good. You've got to start to move, and then at some point it starts to inform where you go. Otherwise, I think you could sit here and be like, I don't know what to do, and I've been there. But if you start doing, it starts giving you feedback.
Oh, yeah.
And with the feedback, then you can move.
But I really appreciate, I think I told you this, but I want to say it publicly, where you talked openly about your husband's struggle with dyslexia. And I can honestly sit here today and tell you, I had never publicly said to anyone I had dyslexia, because it was always such like a taboo thing, and people automatically assume that you didn't understand just the fundamentals. And that your post kind of gave me a freedom, it gave me a freedom, because I got like 2 interviews, and I was able to write about my journey with dyslexia. And I think this is why I work backwards on most stuff, because it's how my mind works. We tend to work backwards and then get to our end game, but we always
That's interesting. Yeah, well, my husband's of course I talked to my husband about before we posted that, because it's a really vulnerable thing to have to talk about, right? But I think that neurodiversity has become, it's a superpower, and actually there's data that shows that people don't like it being called a superpower, but as watching my husband operate, believe that. But like NASA hires a lot of dyslexic people, and spies are notoriously dyslexic. But just different ways of thinking. And actually, I think that the more that we can open up the aperture, that being, I'm a very linear thinker. I'm like,
Yes.
this thing happens, this thing happens, this thing happens, this thing happens. But like actually having somebody that explodes from the side
Yes.
and gives me a whole different view of something, it really strengthens my imagination and also helps, my husband, who's not a linear thinker, be a bit more linear sometimes in how he thinks. So I just think that, this is what true diversity and inclusion is. It's not the color of your skin necessarily. It's about the way in which you think and the way in which you operate, and then putting those people together that have different life experiences and different the way that they think. Mm-hmm. That's when the true magic happens in terms of innovation. And so that for me is what diversity and inclusion really means.
I think that's powerful. And I want to stay right there for a second, because I think we've made diversity and inclusion so race driven that we forgot that it can carry many facets. So
100%.
I appreciate the fact that you spoke to and are speaking to the fact that neurodivergent is actually considered diversity and inclusion, because it brings different perspectives to the table. But it's so crazy that the messaging right now is just really race driven, and it's much greater than that.
It's much greater than that. I mean, it's like, as a gay man, I have my own journey, right? And I've, carried that with me, and like in the corporate world, I didn't come out for many, many, many years. And I remember a very poignant moment where somebody, I looked at the picture of me and my boyfriend at the time and that I had on the desk, and it made me feel really uncomfortable, and maybe they didn't mean to do it, but I took it down. And now there's no way I would do that. But it was, just thinking about that, I carry that with me, that whenever I have a conversation with anybody about somebody being excluded at work, I know what that feels like.
Right.
I don't just have this idea of how to write a policy about it. I know what it feels like. In the same way that so many other people that bring diversity into the situation, where it's like, you want to have those people sitting around the table when you're having these discussions. Otherwise, you really miss that important point of view of like I've been there, I've done that, I've had that thing happen to me. And then all of a sudden I would change something that's a big policy swab across the company because that doesn't feel right to me. Yeah. And having the voice at the table that's been one of the best parts of my entire career, to be honest.
No, it really is. And I think you represent a demographic that just outwardly looking at, people probably wouldn't assume. So having you at the table is really an allyship for many, which I think is fabulous.
No, I love that. Well, likewise, but yeah, so there we are.
So now talk to us about, where do you think corporate communications is really going? Because I feel like we're at a pivotal moment, like we're almost peaking at the top of the mountain.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I was talking to somebody the other day about this. It's like, I think HR has a great playbook for how they moved from, pay, benefits, sort of more perfunctory kind of HR services into essential role at the top table of the organization, culture, getting into like hiring structures, the shape of the organization, where strategy is moving within the organization. And that was a journey. I think as a function, communications is in a very similar position right now, where we're not quite there yet, but we're certainly moving in that direction. And there's more and more people that are sitting at the top table. And the reason for it is that reputation is 25% of your market value. Right? When you're thinking about your entire brand's market value, and when you're looking at when, some gaffes, some missteps can have such serious brand implications that, but not just the negative, scary side, but also like, if you get it right, the opportunity to accelerate your brand in a way that you could surpass all competitors. That for me is like looking at that equation, you need to make sure that you're not telephoning through the information from a person that's not sitting at the top table. But also comms is like, I always think of it like we're butterflying in and out of everything. Like, it's like there's I think three functions that kind of understand, maybe four, that understand the business completely. It's the chief of staff, it's the head of communications, probably the head of HR, and the head of strategy.
Right.
And so, but actually, what we were able to do is like put together the mosaic of an organization when you look at it and go like, sometimes the mirror back to the business of like, you're saying this here, you're saying this here, there's silos here, there's problems here. We're actually almost able to like restructure the organization in a way where you're like, that person's not talking to that person because I talked to them. So actually like there's this really privileged position that's butterflying across the top of the organization, because if we don't, we can't put together the pieces of the messaging architecture, and we can't say it with sort of a way that people understand it. But I think that's where comms now is like, you have to be, we're not just the people that push send, we're the people that organize the architecture of our communication. And if it's not true, people will see it.
Yeah.
So now we've got to be able to talk to the CEO in a really trustworthy, colloquial way on a daily basis to say, hey, I know you think this is happening, but it's not. And so, but that trusted advisor relationship needs to be direct to the top. Yep. If it's going through telephone, you miss a few beats, and all of a sudden you can't actually really unearth what's going on. So that's my diatribe to your answer, but hopefully it was helpful.
That was helpful. So let's pivot a little bit, because me and you both love these two individuals. So tell me why, in your eyes, Taylor Swift has been so relatable in her brand. No, I'm serious. And then I got one more.
I am too. I could talk about Taylor Swift for 100 hours.
Yes, I know you can.
Well, I think that she's tapped into something that's bigger than us. Yes. And well, there's a little bit of a kerfuffle going on with her that maybe she's oversaturated. Yeah. So, so that's, I'll reserve that to the music critics of the world. But I mean, there's a reason that she caused like a 2.3 earthquake in Seattle, which shake it off, right? I mean, that's insane to get that many people to jump at the same time because they believe in what you're saying and what you're singing. Like, that's brand equity. I mean, like, you can't, there's just no way to describe it. But I just think that she's made her stories big enough that everybody can fit inside of them.
Yep.
And she's also gotten some of the sort of general understandings of like the sort of archetypal like metaphors of life, and she's kind of put her own twist on it, but it's like very personal. It's not like somebody else has written it. She's written it. She's been part of it. It's her life story. It's who she is. And I'm a Swiftie, and I wasn't. I asked these people to like understand her and listen to her, but then also like she's so vulnerable. She's so honest. She's so opens her life up to you. But like any story that happened was like in high school, you didn't get invited to the mall with your friends. Yeah. And like, but your mom took you to the other mall, and that was the best day of your life. That's one of her songs. Yeah. And I think about that where it's like, it's such a cool way to think about like such an obvious high school thing that everybody relates to, but it's also the thing of like, I'm with my mom and that was okay. And that's what the story was about. It wasn't about the failure of the high school. And I'm over explaining it, but because I'm like obsessed with her. But with storytelling, it's about finding the way that you really connect with somebody. Storytelling is one of the oldest ways to connect with people, right? It's how you pass along stories. It's what you did around fireplaces. It's how you passed along messages and lessons and culture. Yeah. And so when you can find ways to do that, especially through music, to impact that many people, you clearly tapped into something that's bigger than yourself. And that's why I just significantly appreciate who Taylor Swift is.
Okay, so I got another one for you. So I agree with you. I think Taylor Swift she does great at bringing us in. And like I was telling someone on another interview that I did, when she breaks up with someone, it's like the world breaks up with them. Like, we don't want anything to do with that person because we heard Taylor Swift. And
don't mess with Taylor. No, don't mess with Taylor.
And so, but she has created, which is also good and bad because it can be a little bit detrimental.
Yeah, touche.
Yeah. But she has made us like I would like to say she's America. She's the world's sweetheart. I won't even just say America. It's far greater than that. But she has made herself so personable and so relatable. And I think that is why we love her and we can learn so much from her. So the other side of the coin. So what is your thoughts on Beyonce and this new country approach that she has taken?
I love that we're going into my music love because I'm like a big music lover. One, I saw Beyonce at Coachella when she did her high school kind of band. Yeah. She got permission to cancel it. She did. It was. I mean, like, she's like Oprah level kind of cool. Oh yeah. I mean, it's like she's a platform, not even a person anymore. Is how I think about her. I think it's interesting. I don't love the album. I like a few songs. I love that so many people wanted to collaborate with her, but I also I just think that Beyonce is she's kind of a goddess, where I just like, so for me, she kind of can't do a whole lot wrong, but I love that back to the platform point. I think that she's about giving voice and giving for example, at that Coachella concert, it was about like showcasing the coolest dancers in the world, showcasing the greatest band, the high school band in the world, showcasing the best trumpeter in the world. Where like it's almost like because she's become so big, you can take fame and power and you could use it selfishly, but you also can express it through the ability to use your power to help other people come up. And I think that Beyonce is really like she's inversed it, where it's like, yes, she is famous, she's powerful. Like, what else do you need, right? The ability to bring other people up through that. I think that's where her real true power lies, and you translate it to a brand anywhere.
No, so I agree with you, but one thing that I have found with Beyonce, unlike Oprah, where people have a hard time taking her outside of music. Like when she does other things, it's not as successful as her music. So it's interesting because I think she is more of a platform like you versus like a singular brand. I think when you think of Beyonce, I think you almost think of like a genre, like you said, I don't know if it's necessarily a goddess, but someone that has transcended she's almost transcended time, and she keeps doing that. So it's hard to just say that I see the difference between her and Taylor. Taylor is truly a brand, right? She has branded herself so well. But Beyonce, like you said, is more of a platform. She has branded herself so well as that. And her management and her team has done a phenomenal job. Because one thing I absolutely love that she does that makes her just so intentional is how she sends flowers to those that she appreciates and admires and just loves. I think that is so cool because that is just like, oh my God, that is so different. Like it's not different, but it's different coming from her, right? Like you're Beyonce. Like, how do you have to get somebody to send flowers? And I know she has an amazing team, but it's kind of amazing to me.
It's just interesting for me. It's like, because I think about brands in all senses, right? Which is why I like that. I think that people could be listening to this being like, why are they talking about music? Where for me, it's like all of these, like I studied political theory in college.
Okay.
And it was always about like, what's the thing that motivates a person to do something, right? It could be Lord of the Flies. It could be go watch Barbie. But as I think about like how, like, why did that group of people do that? Or like, what was the thing that, and it's not always, it's never usually a straight line, right? It's the mood music of what's going on in the news. It's the political structure. It's the cultural appetite of what's going on. It's where people are in the moment that there are in their own personal lives. And that for me is like, that's where a brand and in corporate comms right now, we have to be thinking that three-dimensional all the time. Where before it might have been, I get back to the one to many, it's many to many. And you're getting all kinds of signals from all different places where you've got to be really attuned to, like, what does a brand look like in 2024? And what the brand looked like in 2020 is very different. And how you need to behave and how you need to talk and how you need to show up and what your messaging looks like. So it's just, we're in this really incredible moment of inflection where the pandemic accelerated so many trends already in motion, where you're looking back at, if you look at anything in pop culture and in movies, they're all reflections of who we are and where we are right now. Where as brands and as corporate communicators, you need to be like sucking all that energy and oxygen in, because then it really helps you to inform, like, you might get something that's just a little bit wrong because you missed a cultural cue. And that, if you get it wrong as a brand, you really do miss the mark. So that for me is why that's a totally relevant conversation to be having about corporate communications in a way that I totally understand why you went there.
I knew it. That's why I picked you to have this conversation with, because Beyonce and Taylor Swift are cultural phenoms. Like we base a lot of stuff off of them. And even in that corporate environment, a lot of their messaging and just how people kind of just have fallen in love with the brand and the platform is something that major corporations should consider when trying to get their messaging and who they are and what they stand for. And even because the evolution of both of these young ladies has been something that we have seen and has transcended time. How brands should really be thinking. Are you a trendsetter? Are you transcending time? Will people think about you 20, 15 years from now as somebody that really broke the mold and kind of disrupt the norms?
Yeah. I mean, so there's the big picture thing, which I think we've covered, which I really love. There's also like the tactical sort of like strategic tactical, which is influencers matter now more than ever, right? Like where, like, who do you trust? And why do you trust them, right? Where now making sure that you have, like, if I trust that brand, and so it's like interesting. When I was in the grocery retail space, there was a lot of like people trust Coke, Coca-Cola. They put so much money into that. If you carry Coca-Cola in your retail establishment, you get some of that intrinsic brand power back. You carry Coke. Coke likes you, and Coke might be too big, but whatever the brand might be, it might be a smaller brand. But apply that same thing to an influencer where it's like, Beyonce likes your brand, X brand. Taylor Swift likes Pop-Tarts. She did the Pop-Tart thing where she gave it to the 49. Well, it's like that then all of a sudden gave Pop-Tarts a brand pump. But a lot of people are looking because they're confused by the news. They don't trust it.
Right.
They don't believe what they're hearing through sort of direct marketing, where they're going to people that they know and they trust through they built their own brand. Hands up, and if that brand trusts you, then I'm going to trust you. And so I think that like there's the bigger, like, how do you define a brand and how does a brand organize itself too? Like, how does a brand you piggyback and work together on other brands to make your brand stronger? I think that's a really important and critical point right now, and with disinformation and misinformation happening in America.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I think something you hit on that I am a huge proponent of is collaborations. Not being so your brand focused that you forget the importance of collaboration. And something else that I think we all forget about is the importance of building a community. Like you said, Coke, for example, they have loyal fan base, like a loyal community. So just imagine getting the influence of a Beyonce or a Taylor Swift. That is only going to elevate your community that much more because then you're exposed to their community.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Powerful.
I mean, and then bring it down to LinkedIn, like, us lowly LinkedIn users, right? No, we're doing great. But those skills and that logic is applicable. I think as you look at like people that are on LinkedIn right now and that are building their own brands on LinkedIn, and because I think LinkedIn it's not just a place to find your next job; it's how you build your personal brand, right? And your CV, your resume is one dimensional, where your LinkedIn is 3D and 360. So it's like actually like thinking about some of those lessons that you can apply, because it's like you and I working together on this podcast, right? Like we're both showing that we trust each other and that we're going to apply our brand equity towards one another, but also there's a multiplier effect to that. And there's nothing wrong. There's something wonderful about that, as opposed to like, and some people are like, oh, this feels like a bit self-fulfilling, where actually I think, and I think I've said this to you before, I think that I get so many people that are reading out loud, like LinkedIn posts. They send me messages and they're like, I read your LinkedIn post to my wife yesterday, or like that really changed the way that, and you said this about dyslexia earlier, and your dad was a mechanic and my dad was a mechanic, and I shared that. And it's like, you're creating connectivity in a world where we're both on screens, sitting in different places where we can connect more, but also like you're building a community in a different way. And some people have like a problem with that, and I think that that's just really sort of narrow-minded, where I think actually like what you should be thinking about is how we're reinventing the way that we think about how communities are formed. And once you figure that out, you realize that it's like there are social media platforms and places you can do that in a more fulsome way than you might be able to do in Town Square right now. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut over you.
No, that's beautiful. And then let's totally talk about that, because something that you said that I absolutely love is you're probably one of, between you and Chris, you guys are like my greatest storytellers. Like when you guys say something on LinkedIn, it's profound, it's powerful, it's relatable, it's digestible. We love it. We think it's tangible. I think I can go be a mechanic after what you said about your dad. And then the part is I'm like, I love the fact that you told that story about your dad being a mechanic. My dad, that's the first thing he learned when he came to America. And he's still doing it to this day. For over as long as I've been alive, and even before I was alive, he's always been that blue collar worker. But the reality is a lot of those things are being phased out. Like, I don't think mechanics will go away for it, like completely, but just kind of, you're still being able to relate to somebody at even just level wise, right? Because you think of that comms executive, that C-suite, they're so unrelatable, I can't relate to them. But you made it so digestible and like I could touch you just by your storytelling. And I think we forget the power of storytelling and just how relatable it can be to the masses.
I just think like It's funny because it's like the leaders seem that they're like these big people that have all the answers.
Right.
The more senior I become, or the more senior that I've done it, the more I realize that the right answer is that you don't know the answer. But I'm a good problem solver, or I can hire the right people. But also like, but the ability for storytelling for me is always like the way in which, you could say like that didn't work because of this,
Right.
but you could also say like, and when I did this thing this one time that happened, and this is what happened to me, and this is what's happened to another brand, or this is what happened in the other world.
Yep.
All of a sudden, you like get people like you see light bulbs, boop 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 boop.
Yep.
Where it's not just like, hey, like I think that's wrong, right? But there's one that's a manager. Leader is, let me explain to you how I think it could be different.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like the power of story, like I was saying this the other day to a colleague. It's like being able to explain that you're. Oh gosh, I've just lost my thought. Here, help me out here. I just lost my thought. So sorry, I've lost my thought.
Being able to explain your story, or
well, I mean, just being able to explain the direction of travel. Sorry, that's where I am. Start where you're going, why you're going there. To be able to do that, I think is so important to be able to draw people along with you, as opposed to like just tell people where to go.
Right.
And that's where storytelling, I think, as a mechanism can help you to be able to like really just like bring a lot of people with you, as opposed to just marginalize people, right? Because like telling somebody they're wrong feels small. Right. Telling people where they could go is so much bigger, where that for me is what leadership really is.
Oh my God, and it opens up the world. I love that, because it opens up the world to you. It does, it makes the impossible possible. And that's what I like about storytelling. Because if I see that you did it, it's a strong possibility I can do it too. Why not reach out to you and find out how you did it?
Yeah, I
love it.
And also like the relatability, back to your point around like, this is where I was actually going to go. I sort of fudged the last, but that was a good, that was the right answer for me on one part of it. But like the mechanic, my father being a mechanic, right? Like, like you carry all of these, this is back kind of the diversity inclusion point earlier. Right. Like, and I'm writing a blog right now that's like experiences in a straight line, and it's like, because I don't think that, like if you've done like this job, and all of a sudden you've gotten into this role, that you're going to be the best person in that role necessarily. Yeah. The person that's got this sort of like, like my husband and I, we took a year off and went traveling all across the world.
Love it.
The skills that I've learned, and the ability to empathize with different cultures, to learn different languages, to be able to work in different currencies, to, deal with my husband and I together and for a year traveling alone, like just like all those things, I bring that to me as a person to the next job I go to.
Yep.
Right. And like if experience was a straight line, maybe that's not the straight line that you want, especially in a world where they call soft skills, I call essential skills, are required. That if you haven't built up all of these soft skills in your life, you get to that role. You got to learn how to storytell. You got to learn how to bring people with you. You got to learn how to be empathetic. And these skills are what leaders learn, but also like if you have like a richness of experiences surround you in your life, you've learned those skills inherently, not just the vocational skills of how do I do X, Y, and Z, which are essential. Right. But how do I actually have the surround sound of the skills that I need as a leader? That for me is like, you can learn those anywhere. And the fact that we're not thinking that you can apply those to people at different levels, I think is a little bit of an antiquated way that we're thinking about how careers and how people operate. And that for me is a bit of a passion project right now.
I'm right behind you. So this brings up a story for me. Samira and I, which is my daughter, we went to Egypt last year, and her name is Samira. And the crazy part is we went to Egypt, and they have she's a sun, the name Samira is a sun goddess in Egypt. So she went to Egypt, and the people were like obsessed with her.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
And they start singing around her and about her. And I just told her, because she's 17, but I feel like leadership doesn't really have an age. You can be a leader at 5. It's just some people are just born with it. And what I was explaining to her was she was such a bridge in Egypt for the group of individuals we went with, where she could talk to the highest person in Egypt to the lowest person in the village. And I'm like, that's a powerful tool. And I was like, don't you ever take that for granted, because not everybody has that bridge where you can just make anybody so comfortable that they just want to connect with you, and they feel like there's something greater that they need to understand, and they're just excited to get to know you. And I feel like that, like, we shouldn't, that's a tool that we should not take for granted, because not everybody can do that. And we need a lot of bridges right now because there's so much division in the world. So for her to be able to go to Egypt and be this amazing bridge where we got to really intrude ourselves in the culture because of her name, and just, and she's like, Mom, I didn't name myself. And I'm like, I know, but just look how much your name means to this culture.
Right. Yeah. I just think it's like bringing, like, there's a bit of like that. Oh, that was the thing that was me on the trip to Egypt.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the thing that's me at work.
No.
And the idea that those two things aren't married together, I think that's a really strange, and I'm not saying that that's what your friend thought or that's what you were saying. I'm just thinking, like, as a culture that we're like, oh, you were on vacation. Okay, now you're back at work. It's like, well, you needed the circuit breaker to be able to be good at work again. And what experiences did you have while you were gone that you could apply to work? And I just think that we, like, you know, or like motherhood, like having a child, like, you know, becoming a parent,
Yep.
you know, fatherhood, you know, like that, like you learn these skills of like patience, of empathy, of sort of deep love, like, so these things, like, if we could learn to say, like, how do you harness that to apply it as opposed to apologize for it? I think there's something really powerful there. So this is a bit of my drum right now that I'm beating.
I agree. I love it. I love the direction the conversation went in. And I absolutely love that. So, Roberto, as we come to an end, because me and you, I feel like we have found our vein. So we gotta run it back. But as we come to an end, what are you working on, and how do we connect with you?
Yeah, so well, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm a pretty power LinkedIn user, and I've got like a playbook that's up there if anybody wants to see it. If you want to like improve your LinkedIn, you can take a look at it. But I also have my own consultancy, Munoz Communications, which is really focused around moments of inflection and transformation around fractional chief communications officer work, doing the change communication, optimizing communications functions, so strategic communication. So my website, munozcommunications.com, you can check it out there. But what I'm working on right now is I've been like really just trying to build my business over the past year. And I did a post on this recently around like lessons that I've learned from it, but it's been like just putting a lot of the scaffolding up. But, you know, I've got, you know, 3 or 4 really great clients now that I'm working on, from cloud technology all the way to sort of tech platform to a private equity company. But, you know, just, you know, trying to make my mark and show up strategically and make a difference in the places that it makes sense. But, you know, connect with me. There's always looking for ways to, again, my New Year's resolution was to give more than you expect to get back. And so, and also it's virtuous circle. So if anybody ever wants to chat or wants to talk or has something that they want to collaborate on, I'm always there for it.
I love it. And I can attest to all of that. And I think he's, out of all the people on our LinkedIn world, him and Chris are probably like 2 of my top 2. Just because when you're able to share, like at you guys' level, you don't have to be so willing to give information, right? You guys, I feel like you're at the top of your game, both of you. But the fact that you both don't mind like coming down and kind of giving us some information or just coming out and helping us out, I think that's powerful.
Are you giving me? Well, it's 2-way. You always learn something. You always learn something. It's all, you squirrel these things away and take them with you, right? So
yes.
You touch Allison for the time.
So my favorite thing to ask on They Say is, what was your They Say? So They Say can be, well, it can be something where it can either be where you turn a negative into a positive. Just a They Say moment where they're like, oh, well, you can't do this because of this, but you accomplished something beyond yourself.
Well, I think I've mentioned this to you before, but like the thing, and this is sort of sounds cheesy, but I'm cheesy, so I'm okay with cheesy. Where I had, I'm just sort of making fun of myself, where I had on my wall when I was in my 20s, a Post-it note that said, "Choose your attitude."
Yes.
And it was incredibly profound to me because, I could get lost in my own head, or I could get lost in whatever somebody said to me, or that I felt like I didn't do something well enough or whatever. And then all of a sudden it's this multiplier effect that you're like criticizing yourself, or you think that person doesn't like you, or you think something happened. But if you're choosing your attitude that, okay, that person said that to me, but this is how I choose to respond. That thing happened to me, and this is how I'm choosing to respond to that thing. It's not Teflon, but it's a resiliency. And it's also like you're in control of you. You're not in control of other people. And maybe they had a bad day. Maybe something happened to them earlier. Maybe they did a bad job at a presentation. Maybe they've got a family issue going on. But if you let that absorb it into who you are and how you behave, it can really just side rail you, where actually the one thing that you have control of is how you choose to show up every single day and choose your attitude, because you can choose happiness. And if you choose happiness, it will be a virtuous circle in the opposite direction up.
I love it. This is why I had you on They Say. So, Roberto, I thank you for this time. I thank you for your knowledge. I thank you for your wisdom. I thank you for your expertise. And guys, this concludes this episode of They Say. But I'll be back next Wednesday with another powerful guest. I'm just building I'm building a tree here. So thank you so much, Roberto. And you just have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. And bye, guys. Until next Wednesday. This is They Say and Allison.